talking Handling the Undead. And this is a Norwegian drama, horror, zombie film. I would say this is something along the lines of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Maggie, or maybe the first few episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. It is a zombie film. I guess you would class it as horror, but it really is more of a drama than anything else. So what is the story? Well, it focuses on, it says 3 families, but realistically it's 2, and we get a little bit of another one. So, but let's go with the official synopsis. 3 families who, each of them are dealing with this phenomena where the dead seem to come back to life. And these 3 families all have a loved one who has passed away in different kind of times. We have one which is, the mother has just had an accident and she's literally just died and kind of comes back to life. We have an elderly woman in a kind of funeral home preparing to go to, you know, the funeral. And then we have a recently buried young boy, all of which kind of come back to life and are kind of reunited with their loved ones. And it's effectively a story about how these relationships are, the meaning of loss, and how these people are reacting to the sudden return of their deceased loved ones. As the film goes on, we learn that obviously they are probably zombies, and we see the kind of the transition to maybe the zombies that you would have maybe seen in more movies, where they end up being, or starting to become, a little bit more vicious and dangerous. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So this is actually based on a novel and is spoken in the Norwegian language. So this is a subtitled movie. Let's talk about what I think works in this movie's favour. So, you know, there are many zombie films, and it has to be said, at least this one has an air of originality. It's more focusing on the emotional impact of what something like that would mean. You know, how these families are dealing with, without kind of really knowing what's kind of going on, that sudden return from the dead, and what that would mean to the kind of the family unit and the relationships and grief. So yeah, it's a very different type of zombie movie, but it is akin to, as I say, maybe something like Maggie or the first few episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. So yeah, but it's certainly a little bit more unique than your average zombie film, that's for sure. I quite like the fact that this is a bit of a double-edged sword, but we don't really know the cause of this, what's happening. We see there's some type of event, and it's just like highlighted by people having this ear-piercing sound, and that's obviously the effect that's triggered this. But we don't really know what's going to go on. No one ever really kind of says zombies and things like this. But the zombie media obviously does exist in this universe, because we see a kid playing a video game about zombies. So, you know, zombies kind of, at least in media, have existed in this universe. But, you know, it's an interesting concept in that respect. And, you know, there are some kind of emotive performances, and you can kind of imagine, certainly the one where the mother has this kind of child that returns to her, who is the one that is most kind of decayed at this point. That's kind of the one where it's the freakiest to a certain degree, because the child is probably, it looks like it's an animatronic rather than like an actor, so it looks kind of a little unnatural. So it's a little bit disturbing in that respect. Yes, we do get a little bit of the more violent traditional zombies, but it's very short and right at the end of the movie. But nonetheless, I think at least this movie does have somewhat of a build up to that point, and you kind of feel like the changing of the tide. And I quite like the fact that you go through this progression of what, you know, how these people are kind of dealing with these sort of things. That was all kind of quite an interesting kind of idea here. I think the performances are quite strong, and you know, it's as I say, a Norwegian language movie, but nonetheless, I still feel the acting sort of came across as pretty strong. And there's obviously some artistic direction here. I think the cinematography is very nice. There's a few sequences that take place in the kind of the woods and things, and it kind of looks suitably eerie at times. But let's talk about what doesn't work. I think, to be honest, for most, the disadvantages with this one will outweigh the advantages. Here's the big one. This movie is incredibly slow. I really emphasise this is more of a drama than a horror per se, and it is more about those interpersonal relationships. We spend a lot of time with people crying, hugging loved ones, kind of looking longingly and things like this, for the good portion of this movie. And this is kind of compounded further with the fact that there is very little dialogue in this movie. There's probably maybe 50 lines of dialogue in this movie. That's probably about it. I'm not exaggerating. And this has a problem where I would say I didn't really feel like you were particularly engaged with the characters. A lot of it is just done visually. And it's kind of a case where I think the artistic intent has maybe kind of overcome, I think, the narrative. Because one of the things is you never really feel like you're getting to grips with the family dynamic. You're just basing it on people's like shocked looks and emotions and things like this. And people would be talking about it. They would be having discussions, and you would kind of need that, especially with the one where the mother has died, because you have the husband and 2 kids. There's a larger family unit there, and they would be talking a little more. And I think we needed to have that, a little bit more dialogue to really to sort of guide you and help with that emotional resonance and see the kind of the progressions and things. So yeah, it's a very kind of like not silent movie, but very little dialogue in this movie at all. And you couple that with a very kind of slow pace of it, it may be a little dull, to be honest. The other thing that kind of, again, it bothered me about this movie is the lack of world building. I mean, we are led to believe that this has all happened at the same time. So it focuses on 3 families, and then we have there's a few sequences where we see police cars and ambulances, so we led to believe this is kind of like an event that has happened across the kind of the country at the very least. But I say it at the very least because we don't know. The movie never tells us. It never gives us an idea of the world around it. It's just the intimate details of these personal kind of relationships. And some of them, we've got the daughter or the one that the mother, she's out with her boyfriend and stuff, and thinking, is this kind of going on around the rest of the world? Or in the country? We don't know, because the movie never really bothers to sort of address it. And I feel like this movie would have benefited from having a little bit more world building. I think one of the strengths of that is it's kind of like the more realistic and subtle reactions that people would have to something like that. But I would have been interested to see, like, the religious implications, for example, what the church would be saying and things like this, and how evangelical people would react to something along the lines of this, at least initially, before obviously the zombies started becoming dangerous. But we don't see any of that, and it feels like a real waste of an opportunity. It's just more concerned about having these kind of emotional connections, which I think are interesting, but lacking. And then I mentioned it has the 3 families. One of them, which is this older woman that I think is her lover, but again, the lack of dialogue doesn't make it clear. It could have not even been in it, to be honest, because I didn't really feel it added much. So yeah, it just seems somewhat superfluous. It's out of the 3 kind of situations, it's the one that gets the least screen time, and because it's a live person and 1 zombie, I think there's practically no dialogue in that one. So it seems a little superfluous to purposes. So overall, I think this is an interesting idea for a film, and I think there are some elements, if you are a thoughtful person, you like a slow burn drama, that you may be interested in the concept of this, but I think the execution is lacking, and the lack of world building really bothered me, to be honest, because it makes it feel like this has only happened to a couple of people, although I don't think that is the case. So to me it's a 5 out of 10. I got to give it props for some artistic merit here and the performances, but for a narrative it really is lacking. Have you seen it? What did you think? Please do leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.